Hello there, Terry here with another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. In this episode, I have a really great business-minded chat about how to become a TV show director with Mathias Richard Horhager, who is a Filipino-Canadian creator, director, writer, and filmmaker working here in Toronto. He's very well known for his short films, with many that have appeared in international festivals, including Extreme Nuts, Balloons, I Hate You Red Light, Ringo, and Kafka's Little Fable. And in 2017, he was invited to pitch one of his original projects called The Distinguished Dinosaurs at the acclaimed Annecy International Animated Film Festival. His professional work, on the other hand, includes directing the award-winning series Dot, produced by the Jim Henson Company, working with Sesame Workshop as a director on Prankster Planet, and his current role as director and creative producer on Nickelodeon's Blue's Clues and You reboot. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the chat. So, hi, Mathias. Thanks for coming on the chat. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay as well. I'm going on vacation soon to Costa Rica, so I'm excited for that.
Oh, wow.
For just a week, just at the end of February. It's my reading week for school, so I've been looking forward to this because school's taken over my life.
Costa Rica sounds amazing.
Yeah, I've been there once before. It's great. But let's talk about you and less about my trip to Costa Rica. So, I always start these chats off kind of the same, and it's discovering what the passion is behind the pursuant of why you've been successful in your career. So what is the driving force behind what you do?
Driving force. I mean,
usually it starts somewhere in your childhood.
For me, I always loved cartoons. It's very, very simple. I feel like I had some. I think of it as like a fireman. Little kids introduced to a fire truck and a fireman, and they want to be a fireman all their life. I was just very lucky that cartoons is introduced to kids, and I just sort of like latched onto cartoons and just like fell in love with it. Some people are like, oh, I want to be a biochemical engineer. They never heard of that before, but it's like something they discovered eventually at university, and they really latched onto it. For me, it was cartoons, and I kind of I don't want to say I never looked back because I had a couple of detours, but for the most part, it was something I always loved.
Was there something specific about, like, you've directed and you're like a storyteller now, is there something specific about cartoons that you latched onto?
I don't know. Actually, no one's ever asked me that question. I just always liked it. I mean, so growing up, I was like a huge Looney Tunes fan, and then all those Disney movies. Mm-hmm. To me, I don't know. It sounds really like cheesy to say. I always loved the magic of it, but there was something I always kind of drew. I was really big into like comic strips. I think like Garfield for me, drawing wise, was like a big influence. I've got like a large extended family, and it was one of those things where like no one ever knew what to get me, but it was like a safe bet to just get me another Garfield comic book, But yeah, I mean, I think it's just I guess the sense of play in cartoons that really like really spoke to me.
Nice. So now that you're professionally working in cartoons, is it still that sense of play that keeps you going forward and striving for greater, better things?
It's such a weird, because you're talking about motivations and stuff like that. I mean, for me, the sense of play is my favorite thing about it, and I find sometimes when work becomes like work, to remind myself that there's always an opportunity to play, even when it feels like the most restrictive possible. And I feel like that part excites me, and it never feels like work. But in terms of like what motivates me, I mean, presently now my big goal is to like have my own stuff, to work on my own stuff. Right. And I mean, yeah. I guess we'll probably talk about that more later, but like that, like I want to make my stories and see them on TV and see them in the movie theaters and stuff like that. That's what really motivates me.
Yeah, I think that's like that's a dream I have as well. And it's something that a lot of people in this podcast or the creative industry want to do, is they want to tell their own unique stories. And it's really tough to be, because there's only so much money to go around in production that can happen. So like, how do you think you're going to achieve your stories to be told, I guess, in the future? I mean, we said we could talk about it later, but maybe we should talk about it now.
How do I perceive my I mean, okay, one, and I'm a big advocate for this. I just feel like, if you want to make stuff, just go ahead and make it. I feel like a lot of people have. So I do a lot of shorts, and I attempt to pitch a lot of shows. I kind of don't really wait for somebody to give me money to try to do that. I think or at least I hope that after a while of doing it for so long, that maybe someone will latch onto an idea and take one of the shorts or one of the pitches that I tried to make and help me expand that into like a longer form type thing. But I mean, how do I feel like I just keep trying, keep throwing things at the wall, seeing if they stick.
So this chat a little bit is reminding me of so in past life I wrote a fantasy novel, and
Amazing.
I did it in my spare time, and it started out as purely like a passion project where I just had fun doing it. And then when I entered the world of trying to get an agent and feedback and editing and stuff like that, I realized very quickly that the publishing world is kind of set up to cater to audiences that are already built. So like a publisher will have already built, maybe they've built a fantasy audience that wants to see something very specific in their fantasy, right? And so when I realized that what I wrote for myself doesn't really fit that world. And if I wanted to get into that world, I would have to create something for somebody else, essentially. So as you were talking about, throwing stuff at the wall and sticking, but you also have a lot of experience of creating something very specifically for, a distributor. How do you think those two worlds can merge together, where you're creating something very, I guess, unique and personal to yourself and putting it out there, but you also have the experience of knowing exactly the expectations of what the audience wants too, right? Like.
Well, I mean, okay. First of all, I'm going to say you kind of never know, but about like what the audience will respond to. I know that if we're talking like film versus television, film to me is it's like Hollywood Western film is usually like divided up into like genre based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So let me rewind a bit. Basically, I think the there's like this. I'm trying to sort of get into like the core of your question. I'm guessing it's kind of like how do you do stuff that's personal, like your own work, and versus commercial work. And I think knowing the difference, and there is a big difference, is the most important thing. Like I knowing that a commercial work is made to be sold. And you have to figure out what genre of fantasy sells. That doesn't mean like your own personal work isn't valid. It is valid, but you're doing it for a different reason. You're not doing it to sell. And usually like people who I feel like, at least in film, I'm a big film nerd. I read a lot of film books and stuff like that. But people who end up doing that usually like when they are off doing their own thing, already have sort of established themselves doing something for somebody else, whether it be commercials or music videos. Mm-hmm. And then they build up a name for themselves, and there's a demand for like a Spike Jonze, feature film, and then he's able to do his own thing. Like even like the most like original, I mean, like Charlie Kaufman, the screenwriter, his like stuff is so unique. But he was writing for a long time before we got Being John Malkovich, which is like so out there and amazing. And there's the same thing for like a lot of like Dan Harmon and like they were working already for a while, probably like hating the stuff they were writing for other people, dreaming of like, hey, I'll get to do my own stuff. Right. But eventually someone sort of sees like, hey, that guy's a really talented writer, and then let's get him to write my thing, and then probably like, hey, you've written my thing so great, what else do you have? So it's just various stages of like pre-validation.
But do you see that? Yeah, it does. It totally makes sense. Do you see that kind of in yourself a little bit? Because you've been in the industry for quite a while, and I mean, for the shows you're working on, there's like an established, I don't know if formula is the right word, but an established way to make the show that you've kind of learned and perfected, right? And then with your own stuff, are you thinking about kind of all the things that you've learned in the audiences that you've created stuff for, and how you can do it differently, or are you doing it completely on your like through your own creative process without putting in that commercial aspect at all? I feel like I'm just
all those words sounded super complicated. I mean, okay, I think it's foolish. I'm not saying one's a fool to do it, but it's just sort of like foolhardy. How about that? To just like tackle something that you hope to sell without thinking about who's gonna buy it, you know? And I think also, I mean, in any type of director too, like it's also very selfish to be like, I'm just gonna make it and my audience will come. I mean, yeah, maybe some brilliant genius can do that, you know, but I also think that's it's self-indulgent, you know? Like you should always be thinking about your audience, whether or not like you're trying to stage something for a laugh or to make them cry or to, you know, incite like excitement or build suspense. You should always be thinking about your audience, and that goes the same, even more so for the business aspect of it. Like you want to sell a show. Like I've got a horrible example or a great example of a horrible thing that I went to. So me and a partner, our creative partner. His name is Juan Manuel Urbina. He opened up his own studio recently called Venturia. We're checking out in Colombia. But he and I came up with an idea, and we were just like in animation school, and we would like jam and like, what about this? What about this? And we came up with this idea called like Distinguished Dinosaurs on a Quest to Fulfill a Promise. Super long title. It's part of its quirkiness. But it was basically like, I'll do like the quick, super fast pitch. But basically it was like some rich old guy set in the 30s, 40s. Some rich old guy hates the rest of the world. He buys some some remote island. And on that island is dinosaurs. So like we've seen that before. It's like, you know, Mysterious Island or some Jules Verne story. But then he finds these dinosaurs, and the twist that we put on it was like sort of he basically educates these dinosaurs and they become like British English gentlemen. And then when he dies, he leaves them all his money. So now these are like rich gentleman dinosaurs, and asks them to like, hey, can you do this last thing for me, which is deliver a letter to the only woman he ever loved. That like, you know, it's got like all those like benchmarks for those type of movies. And then because it was sort of like all of our favorite things, like we were making stuff for us. What did we think was amazing, you know? And it was like Indiana Jones meets Jurassic Park by way of Tintin. You know, like it was you know, we had like it was a lot of like dark shadows in the drawings, very illustrative. We were like really into Mike Mignola around that time, the guy who did Hellboy. So we made this thing on the side. Like we were working our full-time jobs, but we would work evenings and weekends. And it's like, it sounds daunting, but we worked on this thing for like 7 years, you know? And what the thing was like this Bible, you know, the concept of the show. And then we did like a 2-minute prologue to the whole thing. And, you know, we submitted it to Annecy as part of their MIFA thing. They do this thing called MIFA pitches, which is sort of like you go in and you pitch, and hopefully like they'll pair you up with buyers and distributors. And, you know, a lot of projects have started out that way. So huge victory, right? We get invited to MIFA to do this big pitch. A lot of people really responded well to us. We thought we were doing really well, but I think one of the executives who were there as one of the judges who really thought our work was great in terms of like the quality of it was like, no one's going to make this. It has like Nazis and it has guns, you know? And I don't know, that was the Indiana Jones element for it, right? Like it was like guns. Okay, that's cool. And then like Nazis, because it was 1940s, that we had this like running storyline about the antagonists of like, you know, like Hitler had like he really wanted to have these dinosaurs part of his army, so he's chasing them around the you know, the world. And then like honestly, a month ago, I was like digging through some of my, I don't know, art books or whatever, and I had are you familiar with the Tin Man? Like those artists, they do Super Science Friends.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They've been on this podcast.
Oh, amazing. Okay, yeah. So Brett's a good friend.
Yeah.
And Brett and Morgan, I love them both. But I'm looking at his art of book for his Kickstarter for Super Science Friends, And he's got this story about he came up with a pitch. Morgan was his business partner, was in the States. He stayed up all night, did all these drawings, came up with this pitch, supposedly like text message or emailed Morgan while she was at Cartoon Network. I might have got the wrong like network. It might have been Nickelodeon. But anyhow, she was there. And he was like, stop the presses. We're going to go with this project instead. It was Super Science Friends. And in that like one, whatever, let's say 48-hour turnaround, they learned that like no one's going to greenlight a show with guns and no one's going to greenlight a show with Nazis. Right? But it took us 8 years and like all this like, I can't tell you how many countless hours. And then our friends' hours who dedicated, their time to help us produce it, to learn that like that would never sell, So we made this project for ourselves, and I like pulling it out, sharing it with people, but no one's ever going to make it,
Yeah. Well, Super Science Friends is made, but they're doing that kind of on their own terms and like with the or whatever, right? So, and times are changing, but yeah, I totally agree. Like, I can't imagine seeing Nazis and guns on a TV screen for kids, right?
No, I mean, it wasn't just for kids. It was like a family. It was like a here's the thing. So one of the things that MIFA does, and I apologize for how long that story was, but
it's entertaining. I want to know more about these British rich dinosaurs.
I'll send you the link. You'll be one of the few people who get to see it. But
I would love to see it.
So one of the things, they partner you up with like a mentor while you're there, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he was like awesome. He worked for Sony, and he was like a development exec at Sony, and he was just sort of like, we would pitch him, and then he would give us pointers on what to do, and one of the very first questions beyond like the small talk of like, how are you, where are you from, was sort of, who's this for, like what is the demo for it, target demographic. And we were like family, and he was like, no, family is a feature film demographic, in TV it's divided up into like 3 to 5, 5 to 8, like 6 to 11, young adult, and then it goes to prime time, and they kind of coincide with like where they land on television, who it's all changing because of Netflix, but I think like historically it was sort of like these divisions of age directly relate to who the advertisers at the television station are selling that time to. Like you wouldn't sell like Fisher Price toys when you're doing 8 to 12 comedy, right? And that was like a big, huge, and I had been in animation already, or at least in our industry already for a very long time, but it never occurred to me. It was like, wow, it's really about the business, I'm like, and not just about the business. I think that's what makes it fun, but like, I think it's, again, foolhardy to forget about it.
Yeah, well, from my business experience, we used to, with my one company, I was involved in kind of the commercial aspect of it, and we would buy research from like Nielsen TV and be like, okay, here are the shows that moms between the ages of 30 and 50 watch, and it would be like The View, Ellen, etc. And we would specifically advertise on channels that had those shows on it at certain times. Like it's the whole, like everything in TV is just set up to make money, really.
But the thing is, like, you heard that, like you say that, like, we got a third party company to do research so that we could sell our ads. But I kind of like, I mean, maybe I'm just like very slow, but it never really clicked in relation to what I was trying to do, right? Like, what I was trying to get across with my really long, convoluted question is
there's kind of this story that is told somehow. I don't know who's telling it, but it's like, I believe it, everybody else believes it. It's like, if you do your best work and you be creative, you'll be successful down the road eventually. And it's like, but you need more than just your own inspiration. You need to find, the sweet spot between, maybe it is sometimes your own inspiration, but most of the time it's that sweet spot between business and creativity and like your market target demographic and all those things, right?
Yeah, but I feel like if you like to watch, like, I mean, people, I just came back from Kids Screen and like, like you hope people are making decisions for what's the best creative, but that there are people out there who are like, what's the easiest sell? And I'm not saying you should like lead with one foot over the other. I just feel like look, okay, all of us as like artists, you need to get good, right? Some people are just like born good, and they're like, wow, that guy came into school and he was the best artist, you know? And some people have to like work their asses off, and most people have to work their asses off to become a talented artist. So like doing your own work is the thing that's gonna excite you and keep you motivated. Like, you know, I learned so much from working on my own shorts that help inform my day job, you know. And none of those shorts turned over any money, but it gave me the confidence to like, hey, this is what I make, and sort of have the sort of resolve to make certain calls, because I sort of did that in a micro level with my short films, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, for the I know you go to Sheridan, for that Sheridan artist who's like working on, like, do they want to make a commercial toy TV show when they're working on their fourth year thesis film, or do they want to work on something that like they love? They should work on something they love, you know, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, is that making me sense? I'm just rambling.
No, I think it's a good chat, because
I'm filling in your minutes now.
Yeah. Okay, we have 10 more minutes to fill. What can we say?
Amazing.
So okay, so maybe this is a different type of question, but why are you pursuing to make your own show eventually? Like, is there something you don't feel fulfilled in personally with work, or is it just like, you know, you always have that dream to do your own thing?
I think I have my dream to do my own thing, you know, like I mean, yeah, I think it's that. I think it's what motivates me. Like I want to. I think about this all the time about So I used to hate here thing. So primarily the work I do, like, you know, that pays me is preschool work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I think that just virtue of the fact that like there was a lot of preschool work when there was opportunity for me to like grow. There was a lot of preschool work around, and then I've sort of built a CV that sort of like, you know, he's a solid preschool guy. And I don't like those labels in terms, because it's so limiting and it puts you in this box.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I just lost track of what I was going to say. Refresh my memory. Where were we going? I was talking about preschool. Trying to do preschool.
Yeah. What are you striving for to tell with your own stories versus and then you started talking about how you started growing in preschool when there was opportunity there.
Oh, for telling your own stories. So a big thing for me was here it is. I found it again. Thank you very much, Jerry. A thing for me was sort of like, I never really wanted to work in preschool. When I graduated, I wanted to either, like, you know, get a job at Pixar, or like work on feature films, or like or work in adult stuff, or at least stuff that I was watching, you know. Mm-hmm. And then I think my very first like job as on a series was a show called Ugly Americans for Comedy Central, which is like totally aimed at an adult audience, and it was great, and I was hoping to do more of that. And then a good friend of mine gave me a job on a show called Peg Plus Cat. And at first I was like, oh man, like, so I was a board artist, and I was like, man, I wasn't super like thrilled with it. And then I you know, I needed the job, but I needed to get paid, and so I took the job. And for me, it was like I'm always trying to, like, I don't know. I did a lot of reading about preschool stuff, and I wanted to just sort of like wrap my head around it. And then I thought, now I'm finally going to get back to your original question. I feel like if you could make whatever you want, right? Like just say I got a job at Pixar and I'm making a feature film. The feature film does well and I win an Oscar. What happens after that? I just do that again, you know? And then I do that again. And then it becomes like the like, it would be fantastic, but it would be basically I'm just doing that over and over and over again, hopefully, if that would be success, right?
Yeah.
But then there was this other element for preschool that sort of like, if you could do whatever you want, then it comes down to this other question of why do it. And I feel like working in preschool in the right type of show, if you're not just selling toys, is like, you know, an opportunity to like make the next generation better. You know, like I'm talking about Sesame Street, Blue's Clues, which I'm on right now, like a lot of those shows on PBS. You're and that made me like I bought into that. I was like, okay, that's cool because like teachers are awesome because they're making the world a better place, and I don't want to be a teacher, and I'm definitely not going to be a brain surgeon. But in my realm, in my world of animation, I could get behind the idea of like, hey, I'm making something that like a little kid would watch and would learn,
Yeah.
And I took a lot of pride in that, and I felt like I threw myself into it, and yeah. Does that make
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's a really good way of approaching things, because one of the fears I have is, I'm in school right now and graduation is still a few years away. And I do have fears about what I'm going to do in the industry. Am I going to get a job where I take it because it's work and I'm not so into it? And then how do I find kind of happiness and fulfillment in that role that I take, I guess? So what you're saying is, you were put on a preschool show, and at first you were kind of opposed to it. It wasn't your thing. You maybe wanted to do, a little bit racier stuff with adults or family, but you found pride in using preschool shows as a tool to, make the world a better place and teaching kids who are growing up now, whatever you were teaching in Blue's Clues. I haven't watched Blue's Clues in a while, to be honest.
No, I mean, but it's the same thing. It's not the same thing, but it's very similar to how it was originally. But yeah, okay. I just mean like it wasn't like it was the thing that motivated me. We're talking about motivation, right? It was the thing that sort of like, oh wow, because it felt like some of the designs or the because I'm a storyboard artist, I really like to move the camera around. It's just like something that I'm jazzed about. Cool camera angles. It's what I nerd about. And then a lot of times preschool shows are very flat. It sort of clarity takes precedence over sometimes interesting abstract angles, right? And that was one of the things that was hard for me to grapple with. And I always think of it as like the actual phrase I tell myself in my head is find my way in. So I started a new project, and it's foolish to think like, yeah, this is super simple, I got this, or like, there's something you can learn from every experience, right? So I just need to find what that is, because with that, it sort of like helps me keep myself motivated, and it helps me get engaged, because you can, like on Blue's Clues, I love so much about it, but the thing that really, really, really got me excited was that was the research portion of it. And last year I got the opportunity to the production company flew me to New York, and I got to see them test one of the episodes. So what they do is they sort of, after like a certain, like, I think it's second draft, they do like an illustrated children's book version. And then we went to like a preschool and we were sharing it with the kids, and we just saw what information stuck with the kids and what didn't. And that, I mean, I should like say, we haven't really talked about it, but I'm also I'm a parent now, so that was very important to me. Yeah. And that's like an experience that I wouldn't get working on an adult comedy.
That's really
show.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do they do that for every new episode?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, is there like some school in the States there where the kids are just constantly getting these books, or do they test them?
It's not just one school. It's like they go to I think, I don't know, some of them are schools, some of them are daycares, and they have a deal with it. And I actually think it wouldn't work anywhere else but New York. I think Blue's Clues is not Sesame Street, but I think there's that like precursor that Sesame Street was doing all this testing. So when they you tried doing it in Toronto, like, hey, I want to make a show. Can I visit your daycare? Because you need all the parents to sign off and say that's okay. Because we're also like, we're watching their reaction. So we're like specifically watching the kids and, judging like, what points do we lose their attention span? What points do they are they really engaged? What points are like, are we losing them? Not because of, creatively, like, as an adult, and I'm making like, just say I'm working on a feature film, and I think of like testing, it just all feels gross to me. You know what I mean? Like market testing, and all of a sudden, like someone's like, I don't like that character. If I was working on new Pixar film and we went to go test it, that would feel like weird to me. But like witnessing this makes more sense, because you kind of want to make sure that the kids are retaining the information. Otherwise, why do it? It has a whole different slant. At least, I mean, maybe if I got a job at Pixar and I'm working in that market testing thing, I would have a different view of it as well. But that to me was super duper cool. Like I like.
So you were working on the show a little bit before you went there, right?
Yeah.
So what was the most surprising thing that you witnessed that you didn't expect?
I don't know. I mean, just working, or just like when I was in New York. Like
when you're in New York, seeing these kids' reactions, because you've been working on the show for a while, but you weren't in the process of testing it out. So what was something that was kind of surprising for you to learn there?
Oh, like kids didn't know what a rake was.
Oh, what?
It was yeah. Well, I mean, like they do it. Like, I mean, obviously there were some kids that knew what a rake was, and I can't remember what the actual purpose, but we were raking the leaves or whatever, and like one of the questions. So Blue's Clues, just quickly, it runs this format where Blue is a dog, like a quadruped dog, she's got personality galore, but she is a dog, and so doesn't speak. And there's a live action host, and the live action host has a sort of episodic question, like, what does Blue want to eat today? And I think the episode was, something related to a rake, and it's something that they never knew,
Yeah,
kids didn't know what a rake was, and then maybe that's because it's like New York City and they mostly live in buildings. They're not really raking. But there's like tiny things like that. Like I remember we had to do a different episode, and we were talking about like a circus or a fair, and we wanted to do a roller coaster. Makes perfect sense. It's super exciting. Kids love roller coasters. And then it really, I think someone flagged it and research said well, our target demo can't go on roller coasters.
Yeah, right.
They can go on the teacups, but they can't go on roller coasters. And that was something like, oh wow, it does help to know who your audience is. It goes back to that question 2 on our conversation, where knowing your audience is super important. And it's good practice. It's good practice doing this. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it's almost like you can't assume anything about your audience, really, unless you put yourself...
No, I mean, you have to be able to. I think that's also what experience brings you, I mean, after a while doing it, I mean, you make all these calls and sort of it's part of your experience. That hey, I've done this before, and I know this will work, or I know this won't work, or this wasn't as sticky as it was last time. Let's try to find a way to make this idea really come through, communicate it properly.
Yeah. When you're looking at an episode and there's a call to make on something, for instance, like the roller coaster, is that something that do you always go back to the target audience, or do you bring in research or other people's opinions to is this going to work? Is this not going to work?
I mean, yeah, I guess all of the above. I mean, there's certain stages where it comes, that roller coaster example happened early on in scripts,
Mm-hmm.
And I think a different younger me would be who cares, man? Let's put a roller coaster. It's so fun. And now with kids, I have a son who's 6 years old and a daughter who's 2. That's something that they wouldn't even understand,
Yeah. Makes sense.
They don't I mean that they see a roller coaster, but the excitement for it's foreign to them,
Yeah. Well, you have to take them to Wonderland soon.
Yeah. I think there's tiny versions of that all over, right? Where you just like the rake, you're what? How could you not know what a rake was? But there were enough kids that didn't know what a rake was. Or here's a better example than the rake, because I feel like we could chalk that up to them living in an urban, city center with a lot of high rises. Was one of the things was a crab, right? They had to do. I think one of the clues was it was a crab, and people were like, okay, a crab walks sideways, and then they were like, okay, let's get kids to do the crab walk. And then we actually saw kids get into the crab walk, and we weren't even there at that point in the story where the live action character got into a crab walk, but they were just excited. Do you remember what the crab walk was when you were a little kid?
Yeah, it was a common gym thing to do.
Yeah, it's you sort of it's almost like you lean backwards and you put your you put your hands behind you. It's almost like you turn yourself into a table, right?
Yeah.
But you can move every way. You can move left, right, forward, backwards, because I mean, people can move that way. But we were trying to sort of express that idea, but crabs only move sideways. So when we got like the kid in the crab walk position, kids don't really equate, oh, crabs only move sideways. They just know that crab walk, I guess because teachers teach them all around the world that crab walk. So that those two didn't gel, because like when they got into their crab position, they were moving all around. When we tried to express the crab position, we had to limit it to like, because we're teaching kids, you know, how crabs kind of walk, at least in this scenario, and it was restricted to sideways. Because science says that's how they walk. So that didn't gel. So we needed to think of a different way to get that idea across. And there was talk about like pinchers, the pinchers, but lobsters have pinchers. You can't just like, it wasn't a direct jump from pinchers to crab. It could be pinchers to lobsters. So we were trying to think of a bunch of ways to like to connect those two dots so that it was like very clear and it wasn't subject to too much abstraction, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like these problems are so simple but they have to have like such complex solutions. Like that's something I would never have thought of with the crab walk.
Yeah, but I mean that there's like a like here, like we're talking about back to the motivation thing. There's a pride in getting it right, and I don't mean just like succeeding and like, hey, there was a challenge and we did, but like, ideally we're teaching the kids the right information, right? Yeah. And there were so many times like you thought something happened and then like when you were a kid, I mean, like you thought it works this way and you're like, oh wow, I never knew it worked that, because there was some ambiguity when you learned that. If that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. And like I can imagine how great it must feel when you see a kid who actually learned something new and you're like, yes.
Yeah. I think you're like super proud of it. And that's all it is. It's like sort of how do you find pride and motivation in what you do, you know?
Yeah, and it's like you really fall into what you're doing and what the purpose of it is for, it sounds like.
Yeah, I feel like we left animation talk for a while there.
Okay, let's get back. One thing I wanted to chat about with you, because you directed shows and you kind of shared your story of starting off as a storyboard artist. How do you, other than like there's a position open for directing, how do you move up the ladder or maybe, get people to trust that you are the right person for the job when there are many people who could be right for the job? So how do you specifically move up to director?
You just campaign, I guess. I mean, I guess it always comes down to the initial person giving you a shot, you know? And with that comes, I feel like you have to convince that first person to give you a shot. I think for me, I guess the way I did it was I was making a lot of shorts. Someone reached out to me. He's now become a really good friend, Mike Valaket, but prior to that, like I didn't know him. I kept sending him my shorts to see if he'd post it. He ran a site called Canadian Animation Resources. I believe it's called Cartoon North now. He just rebranded. But in those days, it was sort of like I wanted to get my short on Cartoon Brew. Yeah. And Canadian Animation Resources, and that was just to get eyeballs. But I just kept kind of like, hey, like, would you please post my short, And then he did, and then a few years later I would do another one, and I'd always like, hey, you posted this thing before in 2014. Would you mind posting this one in 2000? You know what I mean? And so he was like, oh yeah. And I think that was enough, and we met up at an industry event, and I kind of like, hey, I'm the guy who did those shorts, and he's like, oh, that's very interesting, and then there was a job that came up, and he was looking for a director, and at that point I was storyboarding for a while, and that's how I got my start, That doesn't really help, right? That was just sort of like.
It seems like a kind of a random thing, but what you told me is you were putting yourself out there repeatedly, getting in touch with people, networking, showing off your skills, and then when an opportunity came, somebody thought of you.
Yeah, I guess. I would boil it down to that. Like, how does that? I feel like I'm a big advocate for making shorts. If you want to be like a director, and of any kind, television or feature films, I feel like the gateway entry point is making shorts for sure.
But, so sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said he gave you the storyboarding position. Is that right?
I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but so basically, he tried to put me forward as the director.
Oh, okay.
And then I think it didn't work in terms of like financing, like so we were negotiating how much I wanted to pay, and then it didn't work out. So then he gave me the storyboard supervisor position. I was doing that for 10 episodes, and then they just like bumped me up to become the director.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
And,
all right.
Yeah.
So, so your opinion because directing is like something I want to do. It's something I feel like a lot of people want to do because there's this expectation that you get to call the shots and you get more creative control, etc. Is that all true? I mean, we've kind of talked about this so far.
It's not really. It's not true. I mean, like, I think, okay, I've never directed a feature film. It would be my dream and hope to get there one day. So I can't speak to what it's like there, but I think in television it's not like that at all. Like you're not calling the shots. You're what you're doing is like. I'm not a sailor, but for some reason there's something about me that really likes sailing analogies.
What?
But it's like you're a captain of a ship, right? Someone else owns that ship, and someone else sort of like okays, or like sort of okays your like they know that you're like you're leaving England, whoever it is. If it's like the I don't even know the names of it. I'm talking about like sailing analogies, and I'm failing at this.
I know nothing about sailing.
I just like this idea. Like, so you're the captain of the ship, which sounds like you get to do whatever you want. Yeah, but someone owns that ship, and someone has already sort of like okayed your actual destination, right? So there's like a bigger company that owns like a bunch of ships, and says like, yes, you're going from England to New York, right? But while you're on that ship, you know what your goal is, but you're sort of like in charge of getting us there, like you know that like, hey, if we're running out of fuel, you have to sort of conserve somewhat, or you're running out of food, so like, hey, everyone, you ration out the food. And I think you're making those type of decisions to get you to the finish line, to get you to the desired destination. But that's, I mean, I would imagine it's the same thing for feature films too. Like, like Pete Docter pitches his idea for his film, right? And then someone higher up at Disney says, yes, I love that idea. That's the idea we're making. But he might be inspired to like go a complete detour, but I'm sure at some point he's got to have to go back and like, hey, by the way, remember that idea of like Monkeys in the Jungle? It's not going to be up, like it's not going to, and then they're like, oh, we love it or we don't love it, like, and I mean, you read about that stuff all the time where like something's in development and like, amazing that like, like Brad Bird's making a new film, and it's not usually Brad Bird, but like some director that you're like down for, they announce it, he's about to make, or like here, Gendy, I can never say this guy's name properly, but like, again, like Samurai Jack and he did all those Hotel Transylvania. He did Primal, which if you haven't seen Primal, you should watch. It's amazing. But like there was a time where he was
this weekend. So.
Yes, you should watch it for sure.
Okay.
It's fantastic. How's that for a plug?
Yeah, right. Too bad this podcast will come out after Taffy.
It's okay. But I mean, the people would watch it. But the point is, there was something I was drooling over. He was about to do a reboot of Popeye, and there's a test that you can find online, and it's fantastic. It's crazy. Like I know the animation community was like heartbroken that it didn't go through. I had the BizDev artist for Popeye on this podcast actually too. Yeah. See that we're plugging podcasts. We'll just plug away. What was his name so that everyone could know to find that one? Oh my gosh, it's escaped me just at the moment. Okay, we can edit that one out. We can put the link at the bottom. Sorry about that. but the point is, like, you know, even him, after all those successes, like, you know, Dexter's Lab, like Samurai Jack, all those things he's done before, something happened where his vision didn't gel with someone, you know, someone who's paying for his vision, and it didn't click, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of like, I think because that's a thing for me, like there's a lot of recalibrating, managing my expectations of what I thought a director was and what it actually is, you know.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like, oh, I mean, I still love it. It's not like, oh, guys, it's way worse than you know. It just sort of like, it's not this whole it's my vision and I'm calling the shots. You're making decisions, and hopefully you're making informed decisions. And I mean, this is turning into like a very business heavy you know, podcast.
That is fine.
Episode. No, but no agenda. Yeah.
Well, now we're both trying to talk over each other. Go ahead.
No, you go, please.
I was gonna ask you then, where do you spend so if you're on this boat and somebody's paid for the boat and the cargo isn't yours and the destination you didn't choose and you've got this team, etc., like where's most of your energy spent, or where do you want to spend most of your energy to produce the best product?
I mean, I think that depends on every voyage, right? I mean, continuing with the analogy, like there is like, you know, like you're you know, like if a certain episode needs to be boarded many times, then you focus on the boards, and if the boards and the script is really tight, then you like try to plus it with the animation, you know. Mm-hmm. and you're really like, you know, working with it. Like animation, there's like giant teams, you know. So like it's ridiculous to think that like, oh, it's my way. You're just trying to like support your teams, make the best decisions. Sometimes for the creative, and sometimes for economic stakes, like for production. Like there's no way we can do this crazy shot because it's gonna, you know, kill one of your artists, or like, you know, everything is riding on this one shot or this one sequence, and we need to really like simplify up until that point, just so that we can really like spend the time that we need to make that moment really sing. And I think I get jazzed about those kind of decisions. It's fun. Like that part is like is the directing part. Like, you know, like that's the part that I mean, yeah, I think I had that same problem. Like, you know, you said like, you know, the word gets around where you get to whoever's telling that story of this is what a director is. It's not bad at all. I don't want to like, you know, sort of undercut someone's dreams and hopes. But I mean, like, yeah, a big thing for me here's something that like when I was a board artist, and I think this would help lots of people. A big thing for me when I was a board artist working with certain directors, and they would just tell me like, oh, it doesn't feel right, you know? Mm. And I always hated that type of direction because like what the hell am I supposed to do? Draw until you feel better? Like, I mean, like, you know, like did you have a fight with your wife that day or your husband, and now I gotta draw until you know, like you're in a bad mood? And surprisingly, like a big part, not surprisingly, of course, absolutely, but a big part of directing is being able to articulate why you're making a choice, you know, and knowing why, for what reasons, is how you make the informed decision, right? So like just because it didn't feel right, like give me some direction, you know?
So how do you articulate? So because a lot of when you experience film or TV shows or whatnot is feelings, how do you really get down and articulate what needs to be changed?
I mean, that would depend on the scenario, right? Like what the problem is. Like if
you watch something and you feel bored, where do you start with articulation other than just saying, you know, I'm bored?
Okay, then why are we bored? Like, you know, like that why question is the most important question. Like, I mean, like just because I'm the director doesn't mean I have all the answers. Yeah. Right. But like, why are we bored right now? Like, what is missing here? Why is it falling short from what we were trying to do? Like, it might not be in that sequence. It might be sequences earlier. Did we not set this up properly? Like, if someone's not engaged and you're bored at this moment, it's not probably because of that moment. It's probably because you lost them somewhere earlier, you know? Mm-hmm. And then that's really specific to that problem. Like it's sort of what I mean is like, and I don't know, like maybe if we went back in the animatic to an earlier part, we didn't really communicate and set up that one moment so that they understand, or when I say they, the audience doesn't understand the stakes here, or whatever it is. If it's like, it might not be about stakes. It might be about like, oh, we need a ticking clock, all that kind of like jargon, filmmaking jargon stuff, like storytelling jargon. But it's sort of like, how do you fight against boredom? Like, I mean, obviously you would hope to catch that. If it's a boring script, then it's a boring episode. But I mean, like, let's say the script was engaging, and then when you moved into your, making your animatics or your Leica, it lost something, right? So you have to be able to sort of identify what that is. And it's not just you. It's like you have a team. It's extremely collaborative. And identifying that thing is I guess a big part of your job,
Yeah, I feel like I keep going down rabbit holes here, but you mentioned before you were working on Blue's Clues before you ever went to see the test audience. How did you know when you were working on an episode if it wouldn't be engaging for that age group? Because there's a big gap between a 3-year-old.
Oh, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I feel like, okay, so I'm not going to talk about the age differences. But
you stopped me at the right time.
But I just mean like because they test every single episode, it was just like, hey, so we would get a report about like, hey, like 60% of our audience really was engaged at this moment. We lost, like, and then sort of, like I said, it was like D2, like the second draft when we would get that. So we would have time to change that script, Okay. And sometimes
so
it's like, oh wow, this is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's like Angela Santamuro and Tracy they're the creator. They basically originally started that way. In terms of like letting the research and sort of, I mean, Sesame Street started it, and then they took it I guess a step further and started doing it for every episode. But that was like their formula, so that's how we worked, Like not every show is for preschool is tested as much as Blue's Clues is, but I feel like that's it has a different agenda, right? Like you're trying to, it's not just to educate, it's not just to entertain, it's to educate as well. So like that's a priority for the show, and that's why we do those things,
Yeah, also probably why it's been around so long.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like part of like the reason for their success is they're never forgetting their audience, And I mean it feels like I'm a salesperson. Would you like to buy this episode? But I mean like that goes back to like being a director. Like you can't just like, hey, I'm calling all the shots because I'm feeling it. And listen, that might work. Like you might have a very talented a guy out there who's making his own short film. He's calling the shots. All the decisions you make really ring, and that he's following his gut the whole time. So when someone he's working with, when he says like, hey, I'm not really feeling this, can you go back and do it again? That could work, but that doesn't really like, is he a good director? Like he's got great sensibilities, for sure. You can't deny that because his gut is telling him what to do. But what happens if he gets a different board artist on his next feature film, that needs more direction? This guy's super talented, but he's not in sync with this specific director. Do you fire that super talented storyboard artist because like in previous storyboard artists that you worked with you were more in sync? No, like your job is to give direction, like you can't just use abstract, like the universe is not helping us with this sequence right now. Like, I mean, are you a good director if you can't communicate what you need? I mean, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but I would argue maybe you're not a great director. Yeah. Maybe you're a great artist, Maybe you should just only be doing the films by yourself.
So what you just said, maybe you're a great artist. How much art are you doing in a directing role? Like as a storyboarder, you're drawing all the time. But as a director, are you drawing all the time?
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
So which is
I mean,
super interesting.
nowhere near as much as like other artists, you know. Like
Yeah.
I mean, other like the designers are drawing 24, not 24 hours a day, but you know what I mean. Like they're drawing their 8 hours. You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of my job is sort of is reviewing work, noting work. I mean, I do like thumbnails and like little sketches to try to clarify what like the idea I'm trying to get across.
Yeah.
But even then, like those drawings aren't they're not like great drawings. They're communicative drawings. They're like sketches and doodles for me to try to communicate with my team.
So when you think back to your childhood, when we talked at the beginning where you were doodling and drawing cartoons and stuff, do you still feel that same sense of play, that even though art is somewhat removed from your role, that you had when
I
you were?
would say, I mean, it's not like okay. Yes, it's true. I don't draw as much, but I
Right.
wouldn't say that art is removed from my role. I just it's a different.
I'm super judgmental in my questions, eh?
No. I'm not. I just want to like communicate. Like I feel like also I should say that like, you know, the way I work is not the way everybody works. You know, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
some directors might work differently, and they draw a heck of a lot. I feel like, so for me, when I was here, I'm gonna go way back. Okay, when I was in school, the hot job still was to be an animator. Was around when Disney's Tarzan was out, and I remember like you know, like part of that ad campaign was like Glenn Keane's like life drawing. I mean, it wasn't a real life drawing, but they were trying to sell like a Glenn Keane sketch of Tarzan, you know, and
Yeah.
that was super exciting because it was like someone's actual drawings were on the big screen, you know. And I think like around like just a little bit before that, they had a documentary, which if you haven't seen it, it's amazing, called Frank and Ollie, about Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, the two old like 9 old men from Disney. And you know, those guys were like legends, and you would see their drawing, and they would, you know, like you would see some drawings from Milt Kahl, and you're like, oh my god, that's the best thing ever. And in those days, actually, those guys would take precedence over the directors. You know,
Mhm.
they were like, I didn't know any of those directors' names, but you know, Glenn Keane and
Yeah.
you know, like those were the guys you would nerd about as an animation student. And I was super sad because like the kind of drawer I was back then was like I would do doodles of my friends like doing crude things to make my other friends laugh, you know. Like that's essentially what would drive me to draw. Yeah, that was the kind of drawings that I did, and I really like drawing. And I think like as a whatever, I don't know, like a comic strip artist or whatever I was trying to do, I would just do like very fast, very quick drawings that would put my good buddy that you could read that it was him in an uncompromising position, and share it with my friends, and they would all laugh. And that's what got like, you know, I was like super down for that. Like making my friends laugh, entertaining them, and like, you know, slightly insulting one of my good buddies at the same time. And it turned out I was like a horrible animator when we got to like when we were flipping drawings, and I was just like, it really shocked me. It was not that I was horrible, that the thing that I loved so much that I was horrible at. Like other people were so much better than me at animating. Just like sense of timing, the physics of it. It was just like it all got lost. And I think like, okay, I remember the teacher says like, maybe you should just be a board artist. And I feel like in those days the board artists didn't have cachet yet. It was sort of like, okay, all I knew from being a board artist was like you would draw 1,000 drawings, and like 2 of them might end up in the movie, and it wouldn't be your drawing anyhow. It would be someone else's better drawing, you know.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me super duper sad. But I feel like I know for sure like Toy Story was out already, but I don't think I think we were still doing VHSs and stuff. Like the whole like big push that like, oh, story is king, that Pixar kept selling. And I think like technology sort of left storyboarding alone, if that makes any sense. Like you were still storyboarding, you were still drawing, but like Flash had just come out, and there would be these awesome designers. And I never wanted to be a designer, but I you know, I always appreciate design. But there were like these fantastic artists who would do like rotations, and then that would be put into like Flash, and then it would be rigged, and then no one was drawing anymore, and they were just like moving around pieces. Oh, it was more akin to like stop motion, if you will, you know.
Yeah.
And then like all the veteran guys became board artists. So it took me a long time to break in. But I kind of was already like studying film and watching a lot of movies. And like I said, I was a film nerd. I worked at Blockbuster. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think it's just like that luck that I was doing storyboards. And I don't want to paint the picture that like you have to be a storyboard artist to become a director. I think it's like a very common transition, but I've got friends who are like, you know, animation directors and became directors. And I think, you know, like, my view of that is like, you know, animation is a huge industry, and there's a space for like an art director to become a director, you know, and an animation director to become a director, and a storyboard director to become the director. And I think like, you know, storyboard forces you to design a little bit, you know, to edit. You have to edit now because, you know, generally the expectation from studios is that you're also working out the timing of your jokes. So I feel like that's the clearest, quickest way. But I don't want to give off the impression that it's the only way.
Yeah. Well, and I really like how your path kind of changed. It didn't change direction, but it like curved and swayed here and there. You started drawing, you got into animation, then you were a storyboard, now you're directing. Like it all lines up from what I can tell, like with the type of person you are and your skills. But from like a outside perspective, it seems a little like interesting in how it converged, I guess.
I want to talk about what you just commented on
Yeah.
about my most recent rant, and then maybe, I mean, it kind of aligns with advice. I feel like you just said that like, hey, it makes sense for my story of like what, you know, how I became this person, whatever, like, you know, like how I got to where I am right now, and then like my background leading up to it. I feel like I don't want to give up the impression that like you know, like a board artist. I feel like everybody, like, just say Terry becomes a director, you know, and then we're interviewing you, and you're like, hey, when I was in the student, I like, if you keep pushing to become a director and you do make it, your story becomes like how you got there. And like, I think like in hindsight, you create a narrative that makes sense. You know, I did this, but that didn't work, so I tried this. And I really believe that like if that's your goal, you can make that goal. If you just like, and it sounds so like after school special stuff, but I remember like going to talks and seeing people say like, oh, I drew ever since I was a kid, and then like they would show a slide of their drawing when they were 3 years old, and you know, like I remember being with a friend. He's like, dude, I didn't start drawing until I was like in high school. And he was a fantastic artist, but like, you know, there's that element of like, oh man, like I'm not meant to be a director. I feel like your past experience always informs, you know, the person you become, and like that you know, I don't think there's one way to do it. Is what I'm saying.
I'm happy
for very long.
Yeah, no, I'm happy you said that. I used to just read Wikipedia articles. I think I mentioned this in another podcast, of famous directors and artists and animators that I really admired. And I would read their growing up years section and be like, oh, well, I didn't go to that school. And, oh, well, I didn't work for this company. And, you know, I didn't start doing this until later. So I'm either behind or I can't achieve the same things as them. And it wasn't until I really started to take my own passion seriously that I kind of realized everybody's path is different. And exactly just because they ended up somewhere doesn't mean that their prior experience specifically, you know, was the way to get there. So yeah, I'm happy you said that. So maybe we can wrap things up on like, you know, your best advice for somebody who's pursuing either a directing role or storyboard role, or just something that they want to do and have fun with in their life.
Right after you said that, having fun, like a big thing for me is like it takes work, you know, and I think like all of those things are super cheesy, but I feel like you can have dreams, but as soon as you start stepping towards, hold on, I mumbled there. Like once you start like moving towards your dreams, they become goals, you know. And sometimes it's not like direct, one-to-one, but sometimes you make a stop in a different career, and then you circle back because you're like, you know what, that was the thing I wanted to do. But like that, we talked about passion and stuff like that. I think those that's like the passion is like the gasoline in your ship. But I was gonna say gasoline in your car. It's the fuel that drives you, right? And you have to work to do it. If you just keep working towards it, you can. And that sounds all like crazy after school special stuff, like a PSA. But I really like, if you're an animation guy and you want to be a director, and you're like, oh man, this Mathias guy is another board artist who became a director. Like, it seems like I have to transition out of animation and become a storyboard artist if I ever want to make it. That's not true, but I mean, maybe that you're an awesome animator. Instead of feeling like, hey, I'm never gonna do it unless like pick up a storyboarding book, practice storyboarding. It's you sort of like think of it as like working out. Like there's those guys at the gym who have like massive chests and their legs are super skinny because they only really focus on one spot. But then there's other people who are more well-rounded. And it's sort of like exposing yourself to other things that sort of like will better position you for that ultimate goal. But it's like, instead of getting discouraged, it's like having that passion to keep pushing you forward.
No, I like that a lot. And you don't know what you don't know until you know, I guess. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
No. I mean, I don't know. I really enjoy. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this talk. I felt like it was very free form and went everywhere. But if there was anything that I sort of missed, I'm happy to follow up with another call or
podcast part 2. Well, no, thank you so much for coming on the chat and answering to some of my vague questions. I had a good chat. And if you're listening and you'd like to follow Mathias or get in touch with him or see his work or whatever, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at @mrhorhager. And I'll include the links to those in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye.